I am here with Dr. Ellen Peters, who is the Philip H. Knight Chair and Director of the Center for Science Communication Research in the School of Journalism and Communication at the University of Oregon. Dr. Peters earned her PhD in Judgment and Decision Sciences from the University of Oregon before going on to establish herself as an international researcher in decision science. The Society of Behavioral Medicine Health Decision Making SIG would like to extend our gratitude to you for agreeing to be interviewed for our first newsletter. So thank you.
My pleasure, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can start off with you giving us a general overview of your current research program and what led you to this program of research. You've had such a wide range of positions over your career, and we love to know how you've ended up where you are now.
Sure. So where to start? That's always the question. Why don't I start with a little bit about what I'm doing lately?
Great.
So in terms of research right now, and this actually has been true sort of throughout my career, I have portions of my research that are more basic judgment and decision making, and then portions of my research that are more applied in some way or another. And then in terms of being at a university, they keep asking me to organize things, and so I do. And so I'm currently at the University of Oregon. I'm actually in a School of Journalism and Communication, although of course I'm trained as a psychologist. I got my PhD at the University of Oregon in the psychology department. The School of Communication is a good fit for me because oftentimes what I do in my research is I look at kind of the brain candy science behind decision making, like how do people process information in this kind of a situation, and depending upon who they are as an individual. And then once you understand more about those psychological mechanisms, I look at, well, how do you improve those decisions? And oftentimes what I've been interested in is how can you communicate better? So how can you communicate about the risks and benefits of a pharmaceutical drug, for example, or of a COVID-19 vaccine or something like that? How do you communicate better in order to help people understand more? Because that's consistent with the sort of ideas, the ethical ideas of informed decision making. But how can you also not just inform them more, but help them make better choices in some way? So that's often what I'm doing. I actually come from a very pragmatic background. My undergrad degrees are in engineering and business. And so I probably bring a bit of that pragmatism to bear with me wherever I go. When I got my degree, I got my PhD in psychology at Oregon. And I had, and this actually goes back to pragmatics again. I was a single mom at the time. I didn't really want to, my daughter was having some health issues, so I wanted to stay in town if I could. And I also didn't want to drag her around to a million other places because she was little. She was probably 6 or 7 years old when I finished grad school. And so right after grad school, I actually went into my advisor's company. So my advisor is a guy named Paul Slovic, who's an internationally well-known decision scientist. He does some behavioral medicine research, not tons, but he does some, but lots and lots of risk perception and risk communication and decision-making kinds of research. I went to work at his company for about 12 years, which is literally how I ended up there. I didn't want to move my kid around, and Paul asked if I wanted to join his company, and I said yes. From there, so I did that for about 12 years. Learned how to write grant proposals. I've been recruited a number of different places, but it never sort of stuck. And Ohio State came calling, and it happened to be at a moment in time when my daughter was about to start college, and I wasn't sure how I was going to pay for it if I was on soft money. And Ohio State has a great psych department. And so I went and visited and just loved them. And so that's how I ended up in an academic position. I had never, going through my PhD, I had not really planned on being a professor. I was open to it, but didn't really plan on doing it. And just kind of worked out that way. And then from Ohio State, Wendy Brune de Brune, who you might know, she does decision-making kinds of studies. She suggested I take a look at this particular position at the University of Oregon. She thought it was a good fit for me, and that so I went and looked, and lo and behold, here I am. So, basically I watch for opportunities, honestly. I'm not sure that I don't think I would know a 5-year plan if I like stumbled over it. I look for opportunities that look interesting. I look for projects that I'm curious about. My research started off in grad school in emotion and decision making, and I followed that for many, many years. And then I dragged it into research on numeracy and decision making. And then I started doing a lot more medical and behavioral medicine kinds of studies, and I dragged both of those topics in with me. Just finding things. I always try to choose projects and places where there's something that I'm just curious about, that I think I can pursue in that topic or at that place better than whatever it was I was doing before. And so it's just, it's something that's fun and I'm curious about. And I try to get all of it at the same time, but it's some topic that I think is just important. And so right now, for example, we're doing a project we're just at the beginning of a project around melanoma in Oregon, because melanoma, it turns out, is a huge problem in Oregon. People are outside all the time, lots of hiking and biking and that kind of stuff. So there's tons of melanoma as a result. And so melanoma it's just a really important problem. And I feel like communication and decision-making sciences can make a difference in that domain. And so we're pursuing that project. Do I have time for it? No. But am I doing it anyway? Yes.
Great.
So I don't know if this is giving you a good enough general overview.
No, this is great. This is fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit more about your melanoma project and what direction you are taking it in?
Yeah, so melanoma is a huge problem in Oregon, essentially, there's a university in Portland called Oregon Health and Sciences University, and the Knight Cancer Institute is attached to them. When I first got to Oregon, I knew I was going to want to collaborate with some people up there, and I asked my provost if he'd be willing to introduce me up in Portland at OHSU and the Knight campus. And so he ended up putting me in touch with half a dozen people I went up to visit. And one of the people was this amazing MD named Sancy Leachman. She's a dermatologist of all things. But she is just this high energy, really smart, really interesting MD whose goal in life is to fight the war on melanoma. And so I've ended up working on a portion of this sort of larger issue, and my portion is around health communications. And so what we're interested in doing is, how can you use what we know within psychology to figure out how to message people and how to deliver those messages effectively to people in order to get them to check their bodies more. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to get people to check their bodies more, to know what to look for. And when there's something suspicious, go to the doctor.
Great. So what are the opportunities for impact in decision science do you see emerging in the next few years, especially given the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I think that the pandemic has brought out is the potential for impact on policy. It has to be done very carefully. It has to be done mindfully. It has to be based on really good research, not just in the lab in hypothetical settings. But I think that, economists have long had an impact on policy in a variety of ways. And I think it's psychology's turn. I think that psychology has some insights to offer into policy that can have a positive impact on individuals, but also on society when it comes to COVID. And I think, yes, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I think that we can have an impact through policy when it comes to COVID. And I think COVID brought this out.
Yes.
Some of the other things that I would see emerging, and this is partially COVID related, but judgment and decision making in particular. So it's not as much this behavioral medicine, but judgment and decision making in particular has long ignored individual differences. Now in COVID, individual differences are a huge deal, whether it's political ideology, that's probably the biggest one, but also age. I mean, age is a huge factor in COVID. And these individual differences, even though judgment and decision-making science has long ignored them, they're important moderators. And so understanding, I think we have these opportunities in COVID and also coming up in the future to understand more about how characteristics of individuals interact with characteristics of situations in order to produce the decisions. And so the situations might be the situation of the pandemic. It might be a decision aid, a health intervention, and to start to understand more about those individual differences so that we can better tailor information to people, put people into better situations so that they can ultimately make better choices about their health as an opportunity.
Right. So next, I want to talk a little bit about your book, In Numeracy in the Wild, Misunderstanding and Misusing Numbers, which was published by Oxford University Press in May of 2020. So I kind of want to know, what was the impetus or kind of inspiration for writing this book?
So it probably comes from two places. One, when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was write. I wanted to write stories. I wanted to write books. And I actually love writing. It's one of my favorite parts of what we do as professors. I love to write. It's like, I look for days when I can like relax and write. I just think it's awesome. And so, so part of it's kind of coming from that. I just like writing. Part of it, but then this particular topic comes from some combination of, it comes from just really liking math over the course of my life. I've always been sort of a numbers person. It's why I went to engineering school, although I ultimately found it kind of boring. But it's, and that idea that our math ability comes crawling out of the classroom and into like our everyday lives, to me, I just found fascinating. And so that's why I wrote it. It's, it's that combination of really trying to understand deeply a topic. And when you write a book, you actually have to, even if you think you know the topic, you learn so much more as you go through and you really think about it, and you have to organize your thoughts across a much bigger piece of space than a research article. And I liked that process. It took forever, but it was it's very educational. I learned a lot from it. There were days I wanted to throw it out the door, but I had a contract, so I wasn't allowed to. And there were days I was really happy I didn't throw it out the door the day before, because there's lots of it. There was a lot of it that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So for someone that has never written a book, the task can seem very daunting. Did you have any trepidation about writing a book before you started a book?
Oh no, I stuck my head in the sand. I didn't actually. That was more. Well, I did kind of stick my head in the sand. I've always had a policy of, if someone else did it, I can do it. So I went through all of engineering school like this. You would start off the beginning of a semester thinking, well, other people have taken this, I can do it. You get halfway through the semester, you think, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on, but other people have done this, I can do this. And you get to the end of the semester thinking, I don't know anything, and I'm about to face a final, but other people have done it, so I can do. I did that with the book too. It was, other people have done this, I can do this. And just realizing that a book is just, it's just a collection of chapters, and I'd written 1 million chapters before. And it was really like each chapter just had, you just had to organize the book into chapters, and then each chapter had to be organized into some topical topical thing that made sense. And so, no, it never really intimidated me, but I think it's because I just broke it down into little pieces.
Right.
And then stuck my head in the sand.
Yeah, that's good advice. So
Yeah.
it's something to be incredibly proud of. Writing a book. What other professional accomplishments are you most proud of?
I had to make my husband help me with this one. What did we come up with? I'm like, what am I proud of? He's like, any awards? I'm like, no, not really. Wait, I actually have this. Wait a second, I've got to find it. What did we decide on? I think the book was one of them. Oh, I did. I wrote that one down. Actually, one of the things I'm really proud of is being instrumental in bringing the study of numeracy as important into the field of judgment and decision making, which is also related to the book. But that came about because I spent about a year and a half doing a stint with the National Cancer Institute. And one of the early projects that I ran into at the National Cancer Institute was the work by Isaac Lipkiss on numeracy. And I remember at the time, like reading the paper and talking to some people about it and just having it stick in the back of my head, like, wait, there's something else here. What is it? Because he was looking basically at how math scores are related to comprehension of, I think, risks of mammography or something. I forget what he was looking at. And I just remember thinking at the time, oh, I'm sorry. Let me get rid of this. There we go. Yeah, every time I like half the time I push the button in the wrong direction. And then I'm on the phone with somebody. I didn't do it this time. Yeah, but just kind of like, part of it was bringing it into the field, but part of it was trusting my instincts. Like this thing stuck in the back of my head, and like there was something there, and I didn't really know what it was, and it just stuck there, and I kept listening to it. And then we started kind of just playing with some studies with it without really having anything in mind. I would just like throw an extra study onto something else I was doing with the numeracy measure. And it just sort of, I don't know, just kind of revealing itself to me. It was super fun. And it was like one of those, like, this is interesting. This is maybe even important. And yeah, it was just cool.
That's great. Do you have did you write any other accomplishments that you were proud of?
My husband said to write down some awards, but I didn't. Awards are those things that you usually use to like communicate something to somebody else. To me, they're just things. No, I didn't write down anything else. If I think of anything else, I'll tell you, but I don't think I can think of anything.
Yeah. What are some of the most important relationships that have influenced your career development?
Yeah, so that I actually spent a little bit of time thinking about that because those are always fun to think about. So the first one's probably my advisor, Paul Slovic. Paul is a true scientist and a very nice man. He, to me, he's the epitome of what I'd want to be as a scientist. He does basic science and discovery. So he discovers new things and he follows his curiosity and he does things that he thinks are important. And some of it is basic science and some of it is applied. And the applied science informs his basic science and the basic informs the applied. And to me, that's how we should all be working. And it doesn't always work out that way for everybody. And some people just aren't interested. But I am, and I like that. So he's probably the person who's had the biggest influence over my career. There's a health services researcher named Judy Hibbard, who I haven't worked with her much recently, but we worked with her a ton over time. And she is this, probably 5'2" dynamo of power, who's just this, whip smart, does not take bullshit or whatever you want to, just, will not put up with stuff from people in a way that I think is great. She's like to me, the best colleague ever, because she does her side of the project. She comes up with new and interesting ideas. And she actually taught me how to be curious and interested in health insurance, of all things. We worked on these health insurance projects together, which when I first agreed to work on them, I was like, oh my God, is this going to be interesting? And they were fascinating. They were important, and they had to do with policy in DC and things that she knew about that I knew nothing about but got interested in. And then there's just a set of women, female faculty, who are a bit senior to me, in different fields and different universities who over time, I just got to know them and or their research. And they're just these amazing people and scientists.
Mhm.
And it includes Karen Emmons, who's known, I mean, Karen, I don't even know if Karen would remember who I am, but I thought she was amazing. And I think she's pretty well known at Society for Behavioral Medicine. There's a woman who wouldn't be named Laura Carstensen, who does aging research. There's Kathleen Hall Jamieson, who's a communication researcher. And they're just these senior women, these women who are senior to me in the field and who are just amazing scientists, strong female presence. Yeah, and they've just had an influence over me. You know, a couple or a few of them were also single moms like I was.
Mhm.
And it was again, another one of those, okay, they can do it, I can do it. Yeah, just those kind of people.
That's awesome. Um, what are some of the most difficult challenges that you faced in your career?
Oh gosh, challenges. Being a single mom was both great and hard.
Yeah.
I was a single mom all through grad school, a bit before grad school, and then all through grad school, and for a year or two after.
Mhm.
That wa- that was that was certainly a challenge. Um, Making several different career choices where I kept being told that I was ruining my career for one reason or another. Uh, I would when I chose to stay at Decision Research, I did it for. I mean, Decision Research was fantastic, but I also did it for family reasons, and was told by a mentor outside of Oregon that I was ruining my career by doing it. I think he told me that another time too. So yeah, just make, it's like I want to make career choices. I have made career choices that are not the most traditional
Mhm.
of choices. And I've made them for reasons that are my own. They're sometimes academic, they're sometimes a combination of academic that I see
Mhm.
and family.
Mhm.
Um, and I've done fine. And so it's but some of them have been difficult challenges. Like I really questioned myself at one point when someone I respect a lot told me I just ruined my career. I had not. In fact, he came back and apologized to me later. Um, Surviving on grant money for 12 years. That's what I did
Mhm.
at Decision Research. It's 100% soft money funded.
Wow.
It's just a challenge.
Yes.
I kind of liked it until my daughter had to go to college, and I realized college tuition was more important to me than my mortgage. And then we switched to Ohio State. So yeah, so those are probably some of them.
That's great. Is there any advice that you can give to trainees like myself or junior faculty or other early career researchers?
Yeah. Persistence is probably more important than anything. Having that ability to pick projects that you really like because you're curious or that you think are important for some reason, either theoretically or for some applied reason, and stick to it. There's a reason, there's a reason you chose it. Now you have to realize every now and then something you do have to walk away or you have to morph a project. But once you pick something for a good reason, just persist in it because we get a lot of negative feedback. We get so much negative feedback in our careers. I cannot tell you how often I've been told no. And being able to kind of go through the stages of grief where first you mourn, or I forget what the 5 stages of grief are, whatever the 5 stages of grief are. But that idea of getting angry for a bit can actually be really helpful, so long as you get over it
Mhm.
and go on to productive. Um, that anger is sometimes part of what helps you persist, or at least for me it is. Like getting just angry at like reviewer comments or
Right.
something. But basically using whatever emotional tricks you have on yourself to figure out how to persist and keep going in a field where it is tough, it is hard. We work really hard, we get rejected a lot, we get a lot of criticism, and but it's also really fun, and you don't get the fun unless you persist. And so the persistence to me, picking really good projects for yourself. They're not necessarily what other people would pick, but picking really good projects for yourself and then persisting. Even when people tell you it's stupid and you ruined your career. I was also told early on, by the way, that nobody in judgment and decision-making studies individual differences. And that I shouldn't.
What hopes do you have for the next generation of decision scientists?
Oh, have an impact on the world while doing great science. What are the kinds of things? I actually hope, because of how our careers and the potential for our careers looks, I would really like it if people ended up being okay with being either inside or outside of academia. You can do great science inside or outside, but we still have that weird, I don't know what the right word is. Stereotype's not right. Just that that sense that if you go outside, you're less than. And it's just not true. It's just a different way of doing a career. And it's a choice, that works really well for a lot of people. Like I said, I wasn't really planning on being a professor. I just sort of ended up doing it for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I'm often told that industry is frowned upon by academia. And also, if you go outside of academia, you will never be let back into academia. So you are a shining example of that not being true.
Yeah, it does depend on what you do. So I do have to say that early on in my career, and maybe this was one of the challenges, I don't know. I was at Decision Research for about 12 years, but I was really careful about the projects that I took. I made sure that most of my funding was coming from the National Science Foundation and that I was getting those NSF grants funded, and that I was doing basic research and I was publishing in the journals that that an academic, someone at a university would publish in. And I wouldn't take money for the most part. I think I made one exception, but for the most part, I wouldn't take funding unless I was able to publish freely from it. And so I was really, really careful about that. I wasn't necessarily planning on being a professor, but I definitely kept it in mind as a possible career. And I made sure that I was leaving myself open for that career. I was really mindful about it.
Yeah, that's a great bit of advice as well.
Yeah, and the other thing, I don't know who gave me this advice. I'll bet I heard it. Maybe I just kind of picked up on it along the way. But the other thing that I did learn very early on is to have a brand as an academic. And so I started studying emotion and decision making is what I decided. And I stuck with that. I mean, I went out in a bunch of different ways, but I stuck with that for a long time. And then I became kind of numeracy in decision making, and I've stuck with that for a long time while going off in a bunch of different directions. But to pick a kind of large topic that you can kind of call your own, or at least not necessarily your own, but one that you own part of at least.
Right.
That your name becomes, you become part of that and it becomes part of you. Having that kind of brand name in your research and sticking with it for long periods of time. To me was helpful in terms of, I always had something to do, but I also became known for something so that people would come looking for me rather than me always having to go look outside. Because if you do a lot of random projects, it can be really interesting and fun, but it also means you don't get known for something so that people come looking for you. And so I've gotten some projects because they wanted someone who does emotion and decision making or numeracy. I've had some funding because someone came and looked for, they were looking for someone who was like me, but it meant that I had to have a me. And that's your brand in terms of research.
Yeah, that's also great advice. So thank you. What's the best life advice you've ever gotten from somebody?
Ooh, life advice. My husband's always telling me to slow down. Does that count?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just that whole kind of, the funny thing is my daughter came back and told me that I told her this, but I swear she told me it when she was a kid. The whole stop and smell the roses idea. that, it's good to just enjoy where you are at the moment, enjoy the outdoors. Yeah, but enjoy your family,
Yes.
have relationships that matter to you.
Yes.
Work is not everything by any means.
Right. And I think you are also an example of that, as you kind of directed your career to take care of your daughter, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky in so many different ways, Sarah. I can't even tell you. But I always stayed mindful of it.
Mhm.
I don't do 5-year and 10-year plans. I wouldn't know how to. But I always kind of know where kind of I want to head, and I watch
Mhm.
for opportunities. And so doing that with respect not just to my career, but also that blend of my family and career has always been very important to me.
Right.
Sort of trying to figure out how do I get being a single mom, but also wanting a career to fit together.
Yes.
Uh, just those kind of things. But it is about kind of being mindful and watching for opportunities.
Mhm.
I've done that in research too a bunch, actually, because I've ended up on these awesome projects with people who oftentimes they came to me for one reason or another, but like I've ended up on research projects in Africa and Peru. I've gotten to, I mean, just like really, I'm working with a breast surgeon, right? A plastic surgeon who does breast surgery right
Mhm.
now on a breast cancer project. I mean, just like these like fascinating, smart people in interesting places that it's just really fun.
Yeah. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, I would actually write fiction. I would write
Would
books.
you?
I would. Yeah, I've thought about trying it. It's really time consuming. I'm not sure if I don't know if I'll ever do it, but I kind of think about it. I sort of half-ass, excuse me, sort of half start. I sort of half start to write stuff now and then.
I actually saw, I read somewhere that you are an avid reader. What are your favorite kind of books to read?
Oh gosh, it depends on the day. Um, so sometimes I read just kind of often, really truly, often read kind of New York Times bestseller kinds of
Mhm.
things. I do not like really junky books. Like I cannot do romance novels. But I like books that are fiction, well written.
Mhm.
I don't particularly like, my stepdaughter is going to kill me, but I don't particularly like serious fiction. It's just a little too stultifying, and I like beautiful words and catch and turns of phrase. I like reading. Those are the kind of things I like to read. Lately, I've actually been reading a little bit of nonfiction. That's not normal for me, but for some reason, I've had people send me books on, like just family and friends, send me books about like, different, a lot about World War II, actually.
Hmm.
Women in the Holocaust,
Okay.
or who are either in camps,
Mhm.
survivors in camps, or who are in resistance forces. I'm reading a couple of those right now. I don't know, just things people send me, but
Yeah,
honestly, mostly fiction.
mostly fiction. So would you write,
I figure I read a lot of.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I
Oh,
said,
I've already forgotten.
oh, that's all right. Would you write, what kind of genre in fiction would you write, do you think?
So that would assume I know genres of fiction, and I don't. I just pick up stuff.
You just pick up
I mean,
stuff?
I
Okay.
literally I go onto my city library site. I always download onto Kindle because I'm too cheap to buy books. We probably shouldn't print that because I do write them. I hate having books around. It's so much paper. So I download them. I download books onto Kindle that show up as people like it, and the description looks okay to me. Because I really do. I read like 3 to 4 books a week
Mhm.
usually, and I can't keep track of them. I've never really paid attention to genres, unfortunately. So I just like read. I read across. I like some science fiction. I like. I just there's all kinds of things that I like. So there's nothing like specific that I like as a result.
Great. Um, so what is it like being back at the University of Oregon?
Yeah, it's fun. It's you go from being a graduate student to being on the being on the other side of the podium.
Right.
Getting to think about the university in a very different way in terms of its strategic direction, and I really like mentoring young faculty and grad students. It's one of the things I just enjoy doing. And so being back in Oregon, it's like I get to do it where it's home also.
Right.
So it's really fun being back at the university itself. Being back in Eugene is great. It's this beautiful little city, lots of outdoor stuff. The pandemic, with all the horrible parts of it, has also been really fun in terms of walking around and seeing stuff. So we do tons of long walks in our neighborhood with our dogs, and just seeing the weather and the flowers and the trees, and it's fun. We've gone out to see some of the waterfalls around, and I'm not much of a skier. I have to admit, I do not like snow. But if it's rainy, I'm fine, and if it's sunny, I'm fine. But snow, I can't do. But just seeing all the nature of Oregon is just tremendous. I used to tell people when I was in Ohio that there were really only two things I missed from Oregon. It turned out when I got back here, there were more, but I just didn't realize it. But what I remembered when I was in Ohio was that the two things I missed were the smell of the air in the morning and the taste of the tap water. And they're both, I don't know if what it's like where you are, but it's fundamentally qualitatively different here than it is in other places I've been.
That's interesting. So can you tell us a little known interesting fact about yourself?
I've told you so many already. I'm joking. I'm not totally joking. I have told you some. Let's see, little known facts. I had my first paid job at age 10. I delivered newspapers after school for the Detroit News, whether in the horrid snow of Michigan and the horrid humidity of Michigan in the summer. Yeah. So that's probably a little known fact. I'm really good at finding things that are lost. I always joke around with my husband, and I said, no, you just have to think like the keys. If you think like the keys, you'll find them. I once found his keys in his bathroom robe. He'd been looking for them for like 3 days. And I'm like, well, tell me where you were. What were you doing? And I suddenly looked up at him and I said, they're in your bathrobe. And they were. What other little known things? I don't know. That's all I could think of.
Those are good.
Oh, yeah. When I was a kid, I used to hunt frogs and snakes all the time. I was really into going out into we had a big schoolyard in our backyard with a pond and a stream. And I like going out and collecting frogs and snakes.
Where in Michigan did you grow up?
A suburb of Detroit. Birmingham, if you know Michigan at all, right near 14 Mile and Telegraph. People who know Michigan know what that is.
Yep, I'm from Michigan.
Are you from there?
Yeah.
Oh, where are you from?
So I grew up in about an hour south of Traverse City.
Oh, quite a bit further north then, though.
Yeah. So
so I'm just in one of those. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I grew up there, but most of my family is around the Ann Arbor area.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so Ann Arbor was about 45 minutes from where I grew up. Although I have to admit, I had never been there until I went to visit. I think I was giving a talk as a faculty member by the time I went to visit. But it was only like 45 minutes from me, and probably half my friends went there for undergrad.
Yep. And I
went a different direction.
Yeah,
I escaped for a while.
Yeah, you did not decide to go there.
No, I was so sick of the weather there. I really didn't like it. I had actually vowed to never go back to the Midwest after high school. And then I ended up in Ohio.
Right, same weather, right?
Same weather. Yep, pretty much.
And so to end the interview, is there anything else that you would like to share with the health decision-making SIG that we didn't cover?
Oh gosh, probably only that I really appreciate your asking me. I feel so honored.
Oh, we feel
just
so
by you
honored.
asking me and getting to do this.
No, we feel honored that you took time out to do this for us. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. It's really nice to see you in, sort of person.
Yeah, exactly.